Okay, hi everyone, welcome to Crazy Talk again. This is going to be the second of the videos today. This is going to be slightly more serious and more on topic for the channel. And I know that quite recently I posted a video about a very vague general introduction to the subject of self-harm, and I left a lot of it out. I know I did, and that was specifically so that I could talk about finer points in whole videos, which is what I'm going to do now. And if you don't mind, I do have a cup of tea with me because tea cures everything, as you may or may not know. Okay, now today I want to talk about when self-harm goes too far and what to do in that situation. I've been in that situation more than once. As I've previously mentioned, self-harm doesn't just kind of boil down to cutting. It can be a number of other things, but I'm going to kind of just focus on cutting and maybe overdosing as well today. Mainly because those are the ones that are probably going to land you in hospital more than, say, burning or kind of pulling hair and kind of hitting. So, if I just make the point first of all that I did leave out of the last video, and I shouldn't have, regarding self-harm, which is people often assume that people who self-harm want to die or want to kill themselves, and that is not necessarily true. A lot of people who self-harm, they're not using the self-harm to try and kill themselves. In fact, some people use the self-harm to stop themselves from committing suicide. That doesn't mean to say that everybody who self-harms is suicidal. I personally am not suicidal, and it's more of a coping mechanism for the things around you and what you have to deal with. So, as I said before, like the way an alcoholic drinks their night away, that's essentially the same thing for a self-harmer. So, what happens, or what should you do, when self-harm goes too far? Say you've cut too deep and it won't stop bleeding, or you've overdosed more than maybe you should have. I'm not saying there's a certain amount that you should overdose, far from it, but you get what I mean. Anyway, you've kind of gone that little bit too far, and now you're worried because you didn't mean to do that, you didn't mean to cut so far, or you didn't mean to cut so deep or cut so much, and now things aren't looking so great. So, the only thing I can say in this situation is to go to hospital. Go by whatever means possible, even if it does mean calling the emergency services, obviously 999 here in the UK, 911 in the US, and other countries, I think in Europe it's 112. Anyway, call your emergency services if you have to, and just get yourself to hospital, because I can tell you from experience, it's not that bad. And I mean that to say, oh, it's not exactly, a walk in the park, but there is a lot of shame. I think people don't realise the level of shame that a person can feel if, say, they have gone too far with their self-harm, and say nobody knows. So they don't want to go to the hospital and have people knowing about the deepest, darkest secret. And I can fully understand where that comes from. I have been there myself. I've been to hospital probably a handful of times. I can still count on one hand the amount of times I've been to hospital because of self-harm. And it's not that it gets easier with every time I've gone. I remember the first time I was very, very shaky. I was in a bit of a panic state. I was absolutely mortified that I'd had to come out into the public and have stitches done. That frightened me no end, and I thought that it would be the last time that it ever got that bad. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. But the next couple of times I have gone to hospital because of self-harm, I have been more relaxed each time. And it's not to say that I've accepted it or that it's a good thing, because it's not. It's a terrible, terrible thing for you to have, or for anybody to have got to that point where their self-harm has gone a little bit overboard and they need to go and get stitches or whatever you need. It's a terrible place to be, and I know that. But it's better to go to the hospital than to sit there worrying and panicking and trying to write it yourself, because that might not work. Or that might have some pretty serious consequences, particularly if you've cut very deep and you need stitches, or at least some steri strips. That's a wound, and that can get infected, and they at the hospital will help kind of prevent that, especially if it's been stitched up and been well dressed. But going back to the point I made about being relaxed, the next times I've been to the hospital, it's not so much that I've gone, okay, this is acceptable, because again, it's not acceptable. But I've come to realise that it's the right thing to do. That if the self-harm has got to a certain point, the right thing to do is to go to the hospital. They will sort you out. I think that has kind of progressed with the fact that I don't feel any shame for the mental illness that I'm struggling with, and the self-harm is a symptom of that. I was going to say just a symptom of that, but that kind of belittles the whole thing. So yeah, the only advice I can give to you is, if it gets too far, go to the hospital. If a friend has to drive you, if a family member has to drive you, if the ambulance has to come and get you. It can seem scary. I know that it's terrifying when you're in the moment. But I can tell you right now that when you come back home from that hospital visit, it could take a couple of hours. A&E departments are a little bit chaotic sometimes. But you will not regret having that professional help. It needs to be done. So, with that in mind, have a great new year. I knew this was probably a bit of a bum note to end my videos on for 2012, but this isn't exactly a bright and rosy subject. So, what do you want me to do? Okay, so have a great new year, and I will see you in 2013. And hopefully, this will be the year where a lot of us recover. So stay strong, keep on fighting. This is Crazy Talk. Have a lovely time.